Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. There's a brand new episode of the Church News podcast. This is number 304, titled Preparing for the Salt Lake Temple Celebration. And there were a number of eyebrow-raising things said in this interview that I'm excited to highlight for you. It makes me all the more excited for this upcoming open house and the rededication of the Salt Lake Temple. We've talked about the implications of this so many times, but now we have some more things to think about. This is incredible. You can watch this on YouTube if you prefer. I'll put a link for this in the description box below. I watched the entire thing. And as I was listening to it, there was a scripture that came to mind. Let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 6, starting in verse 5. This is the story of the ark coming to Jerusalem for the first time. What happened here feels like what we're going to be doing as we anticipate the rededication of the Salt Lake Temple. I want to point out that the ark, I've said this many times on the channel, but the ark essentially represented church headquarters. Israel wandered in the wilderness. Once it entered the promised land, the ark initially went to Shiloh. Church headquarters did not go to Jerusalem at first. It went to Shiloh. And it was there for the better part, I think over 300 years. And then finally, it came to Jerusalem. And then afterwards, Solomon's temple was built. I tend to think that that's a foreshadowing of the second coming in the millennium. That entering the promised land is like entering into the millennium. And I think that church headquarters is probably going to remain in Salt Lake for some time. And in a natural way, eventually church headquarters will transfer to Jackson County. I have plenty of quotes that talk about the fact that Jackson County will be the new Jerusalem. But in any case, what happened here, I feel like this is what we're going to be doing with the Salt Lake Temple shortly. Verse 5, and David and all the house of Israel played before the Lord on all manner of instruments made of fir wood, even on harps, and on psalteries, and on timbrels, and on cornets, and on cymbals. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was girded with a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. This podcast was all about the celebration of the upcoming rededication of the Salt Lake Temple. And there's something really surprising that President Nelson said in regards to that. Okay, so let's go ahead. So we have Sherry Dew. She's interviewing Elder Brent H. Nilsson in Emeritus General Authority 70 and Richard Sutton from the church's temple department. And Sherry Dew is currently Executive Vice President of Deseret Management Corporation. Okay. At this part, we have Richard Sutton speaking. But as Elder Nilsson said, the first presidency made the decision to have an executive committee. So this is for the open house. Kind of cross-departmental established. And shortly after that decision was made, Elder Anderson invited me into his office. And he said, you're going to take a break from serving in the temple department specifically, or generally, I should say. And specifically, just be responsible for the Salt Lake Temple open house. And it was about that time, and I think this is crucial, that President Nelson said, quote unquote, this needs to be a celebration. And so we went from a Salt Lake Temple open house to a Salt Lake Temple celebration under prophetic direction, which was really, really quite neat to be a part of. Okay, so this is a prophetic directive. That this is not just going to be an open house. This is going to be a celebration. This is what made me think of that scripture from 2 Samuel. Right now, church headquarters is in Salt Lake. And for the last 7 years, that temple has been under renovation. It has not been operational. The brethren have continued to meet in the Joseph Smith Memorial Building. There was a Salt Lake News article, you can just Google it, that talked about the fact that I think it was the eighth floor is the floor that they like temporarily dedicated as like a temple space where they can meet. But this is really big, especially as we think about the second coming. I think we're going to review at the end of the video the prophecies that were issued at the dedication, the original dedication of the Salt Lake Temple, and what this rededication may mean in regards to those prophecies. But we just had President Nelson, who was so focused on the second coming. And it was under his presidency that this was announced and it was initiated. It was supposed to be done by 2024. Do you remember that? But it's ended up being 7 years, which I don't think that that's coincidental. 7 is one of those sacred numbers. So, second coming, I think, it's just my opinion, and I think a lot of yours. We got that sacred number 7, and just something is going on here. But now we know that he gave prophetic direction that this is going to be a celebration, not just an open house. But there's more. Let's continue. Sherry Do. So how early in this process did you sense that, oh, this may be way different than I thought it was going to be? Elder Brent H. Nilsson. About the time that I thought it was going to be an open house. So we've all done those before. We've all participated in those. But then President Nelson said, no, this is a celebration. And so he renamed the event, and it became a totally different idea than I was contemplating at the time. This is Elder Nilsson right here. Richard Sutton. And right from the beginning, now listen to this. Listen. And right from the beginning, when you have 4 apostles, a third of the quorum of the 12, assigned to a specific project. I've worked for the church for almost 20 years now. I've never been involved in a project that has 4 apostles assigned to it. And so, yeah. There was a lot of indicators right from the beginning that this was not going to be a normal open house. That is astounding. I don't know everything that goes into it. I have no experience with the church. I've never worked for the church. But even to me, it seems like 4 apostles working on this celebration / open house. Okay, continuing. Elder Brent H. Nilsson. Well, I might just say, not many people know this unless they visit our visitor center that just opened, but President Nelson added an additional 100,000 square feet to the historic temple. Now, I know that there were new additions to it. I'm not sure if we've covered the square feet or if they've ever reported that before. I did know that there were more floors that were added underground, but anyway, in case you didn't know, an additional 100,000 square feet. So we've got the historic temple that all of us are familiar with, but he added another 100,000 square feet that runs from the historic temple to North Temple underground, 4 levels. And so we now have 22 ceiling rooms, 2 baptismal fonts. It's a new structure for all those things, but the historic temple has pretty much remained the same with this big addition. Sherry Do. Now this gets exciting here too. Is there anything that would be appropriate to say in this context about what President Nelson said, or how he explained the reasoning for adding that many square feet? Richard Sutton. It was interesting to watch that prophetic direction come of this temple needs to serve the world. It wasn't just, I think, a specific temple district like we're used to. Sherry Do, as per normal. Richard Sutton, yeah, as per normal. When you look at it, Or when you look at, okay, these are the people in the district, but it's really, you think about General Conference, you think about the Olympics in the past, the Olympics that are coming in the future, many events that take place in Salt Lake City, not just church events, but an array of different events. The Salt Lake Temple becomes a gathering place of a lot of members of the church from around the world. And so it wasn't just a normal temple district that we were looking at. He was looking at it much larger from a prophetic vision. I should put that in red. A prophetic vision of, quote, this really needs to service the world in a way that other temples don't, end quote. Elder Brent H. Nelson. And my wife and I were sealed in the Salt Lake Temple. I'm from Idaho. She's from Texas. We don't live in Salt Lake City, but everyone at the time, and I think it continues to be that way, that we all want to be sealed in the Salt Lake Temple. Well, I mean, not everybody. Uh, I could have been sealed in the Salt Lake Temple, but we got sealed in the Bountiful Utah Temple. It's the iconic place for us to be sealed. And I think President Nelson realized that and added all these additional sealing rooms. So I think it isn't, we're used to thinking, well, that's my temple district and we all go to that temple. But the Salt Lake Temple is the world's temple district. I thought that was pretty powerful. The Salt Lake Temple is the world's temple district. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Wouldn't you? Have you guys gone to the Salt Lake Temple to receive your own endowments or be sealed, or have you gone through it to do vicarious work? Let me know in the comments. I've only been there to do vicarious work. I've done it all except for, well, I haven't done sealings in there, but okay, continuing. And even as we have prepared for the celebration, some of our area presidencies around the world have said, so why is this important to us? Okay, I'm not going to, I mean, of course. Okay, sorry. And we explained to them to the area presidencies. I'm not putting down area presidencies, but why is this important to us? And we explained to them, this is the center of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is where the first presidency and the 12 meet every Thursday. This is a different temple than other temples in the church. And young people are going to come here to be sealed that have nothing to do with Salt Lake City. There's Richard Sutton. Okay, later on, there's some more very interesting things. Okay, Elder Brent H. Nelson. Well, I just think it's important to point out that President Nelson had a very distinct vision of what the Plaza, which is the area of the church of Temple Square that runs from State Street to the temple, he wanted it to look a specific way. Let's take a look at that again, just in case you're new to the channel, in case you haven't been to Salt Lake before, you haven't been to Temple Square. So if we look at it from this view, okay, north is, up and then south is down. There's the Salt Lake Temple. So you have the western block with the temple and the tabernacle and other buildings. You have the Main Street Plaza that connects the two blocks. And over here you have the church office building, the administration building, which has the offices of the brethren. And in between the church office building and the administration building, you have this plaza. I love this area. I always have. And it turns out that this was not just, some kind of beautification. It's time to update this. And not much thought was given to it. This is prophetic, what has changed. They've changed it pretty dramatically. Let's go back in time. There's a thing here we can look at historic satellite images. Let's go to 2004. No, that's no good. 2005. Okay, yeah, this is fine. This is what it used to look like. It's changed from like a square or a rectangle to an oval. You had water that came in here. I guess it was part of City Creek, I think. So there used to be this big fountain in between the two buildings, and I'm going to miss that fountain. I'm a big fan of fountains. But you had water that came through here. You had a fountain right here in the middle, and then you had these like two water features right here, kind of like a cascade of water that went from this direction to toward the temple. I think anyway. I think that's the way it flowed. I took a picture over here. You had this like little area, and there was some water over here, and there was like a drainage type thing, and I got this picture. This is shortly after I got home from Spain for my mission. Um, that first birthday, my parents got me this nice digital SLR camera, and I love photography. And I took this picture. I love this picture. I love the colors of it. It's very vibrant, and the water looks really cool. I obviously used a very high shutter speed to get that. But this is what used to be there, but that's not there anymore. Um, so they did a major overhaul. Let's go back to present. Now it looks like this, and you can't see it here, obviously, on Google Earth, but you have all these flags of the world that go around this, and that's actually a big deal. But let's go back to this. So President Nelson had a very distinct vision of what the plaza, which is the area of the church of Temple Square that runs from State Street to the temple, and he wanted it to look a specific way. And in fact, I saw his diagram of this. So I don't know if President Nelson had like a President Hinckley moment where President Hinckley, when he was, I think it's when he was in Hong Kong, China, they were looking at different potential temple sites. And one night, he was sleeping, and he received a dream or a vision, and then he wrote it down on a piece of paper. And he received instruction on how to make the Hong Kong temple, how it could be just like one building with multiple facilities in it. Not all the floors had to be the temple itself. This kind of sounds like that. He said, and in fact, I saw his diagram of this, and he wanted a plaque on State Street, and it's right there now, and it's Isaiah 2. We've looked at this before on the channel. Here's a video that not that. Here's a video that I took back in, I think it was September of last year. I was in Salt Lake, and you have this monument, Isaiah 2:2. And it came to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house, okay, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. So you get this like dramatic view. Again, this is as viewed from right here, right? As you're looking west toward the temple. And it's right here. Here's State Street. It's right here basically at the entrance. And you look through here, and you can see the flags and church office building, church office building, administration building, and then the Salt Lake Temple all the way over there. By the way, I just want to give you a quick update. Let's take a little tangent. Something happened recently. I just noticed this today. So here in Independence, Missouri, on the west side of the temple lot, you have this UN Peace Plaza. It commemorates Harry S. Truman announcing to the United States from the auditorium that the United States had signed the UN the UN Charter to create the United Nations. Well, since I've been here, it's never been in very good condition. This is what it looked like last year. This is the front of it. You have the AZA at the end that are missing. But today we were driving by there. I don't drive on this side very often because there's nothing to see here. Except for today there was. It looks like all those letters have come off, except for the two P's. I guess they didn't want the P's. So you have the two P's, and you got this one period that came after the U of UN. Those are now gone. So that's kind of interesting. I'm just bringing this up because we're talking about plazas and signs. It's interesting because recently, and I posted this on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to follow me there if you aren't, because I post additional content. The same thing happened, or something very similar to the Community of Christ temple sign on the northeast side of the temple. It seems that it was recently vandalized or defaced. This is what it looks like right now. People were speculating, well, maybe they're like getting ready to redo it, like repaint it or something like that. And I don't think so, because it's been a while that it's been like this. Here's another view of it. I don't know if it was like the same person that did that to the UN Peace Plaza. At the UN Peace Plaza, they actually took more. Like there's like a plaque as you like enter the plaza. There's a plaque explaining what that area is that's been removed. But for this, this is what it used to look like. This is a picture from November of last year. It was just perfect and pristine. So yeah, this is what it looks like now. I find it interesting that the Community of Christ Temple, when you go over to the World Plaza, they have like a little monument of a guy, beating a sword into a plowshare. And they have a scripture from Isaiah. I can't remember which scripture it is off the top of my head, but it's about, no more war during the millennium. But at our church headquarters, we also have an Isaiah scripture, Isaiah 2:2, and it's a prophecy that's specifically being fulfilled by the Salt Lake Temple and church headquarters being in Utah. Isn't that interesting? Okay, back to this. Okay. And as you look at that plaque and you face the temple, you see all the flags around the world leading to the temple. And he used to regularly say, quote, "This is a fulfillment of that prophecy, that all the nations of the world will come to this temple," end quote. Now that's really interesting. We've heard something similar to this, but whenever it's been said before, it was with less like certainty. But he is saying, again, this is Elder Brent H. Nelson, that President Nelson used to regularly say, "This is a fulfillment of that prophecy, that all the nations of the world will come to this temple," end quote. And that's what's going to happen during this celebration. We're inviting all of the leaders around the world to come. You guys, this is no small thing, what's going on right now. And again, I feel like it has something to do with the second coming. I feel like it has something to do with Salt Lake being like Shiloh, back in the Old Testament while the ark was in Shiloh. I don't know, but it just feels like there's something going on. And we'll talk about those prophecies that were given when it was first dedicated at the end of the video. Okay, Elder Brent H. Nelson said, so of the committee that was put together of the four apostles, he said, "So we're led by President Uchtdorf. He is the chairman of everything that we do. And then we have Elder Cook of the 12, who also serves on the committee, Elder Anderson of the 12, and then Elder Stevenson. So those are the four that are on that committee." What President Nelson said, well, when he was correcting it. Oh, wait, no, I didn't get to that part yet. Okay. This is Richard Sutton. But also, like Elder Nielsen mentioned, we've hired people who have been in the tops of their fields and have been prepared for these kinds of moments. People that have worked in the Olympics and other areas to prepare for a large event of this scale. And it's just been incredible to watch. You guys, this is something that we have talked about on the channel before. How when the Winter Olympics originally came to Salt Lake in 2002, I wondered if maybe that was just a preparation for what's to come. And it seems like that's his opinion as well that, President Hinckley, he said that there was a prophecy of Brigham Young that was fulfilled with those Winter Olympics. And it had to do with kings and emperors, and ambassadors of the nations coming to Salt Lake. And I think that definitely is true, especially since the prophet said that was fulfillment. But it seems like that was maybe like a practice run, so to speak, of what's about to happen. We have, okay, so we have this, we have the rededication of the Salt Lake Temple, but we also have the bicentennial of the church coming up in 2030. I think that's going to be a really big deal. They're probably going to be doing stuff in and around Temple Square. And then we have the Olympics coming again in 2034. So these are items from Elder Stevenson's talk where he said that this was going to be a decade never to be forgotten from 2024 until 2034. Continuing. The other thing I'd say is I envisioned at first an executive committee that would be more of an approving body, not really getting into the details, but really high level, kind of the surface of something, approve it, get the direction, and then the team goes to work. That has not been this executive committee. President Uchtdorf, from day one, and from the very first executive committee meeting, said, quote unquote, this is a working committee. And that's exactly what it's been. Here's the celestial room of the Salt Lake Temple. He continues, I think people, members of the church, would be shocked of how intensely aware of every detail these four brethren of the 12 are. They're in the details. He has more to say about that. They know what's going on. They're engaged in it. They've given direction in it. They're working. We get calls, Elder Nielsen and I, day and night from these members of the 12. But it's incredible. It's incredible that they care. They're involved this much and they know what's going on. They're part of it. And it's been a life-changing experience for me, a kind of watch that and be involved in it. Sherry do. So Elder Nielsen, you've been around church headquarters for quite a while. You've had a lot of important assignments, leading roles. What do you think how would you characterize what it says about the fact that four members of the 12, I've never seen four members of the 12 assigned to something before either. I don't have the experience the two of you do, but I've been around the block a fair amount. And what do you think that says about this? Why is this such a big deal? Elder Nielsen, I find it fascinating. It was the first presidency who established that committee. It wasn't something anybody else came up with. And they actually assigned these four apostles to take the assignment to be over this committee. And it tells me the way the Lord looks at this temple. Sorry, you guys, this is big. This is essentially as big as it gets at this point. I'm not sure if right now there could be anything bigger, unless they announce that the temple lot has been purchased in Jackson County and the other land around it, and then the 24 temple complex is going to be built. This is as big as it gets right now, and I love that. It tells me the way the Lord looks at this temple. This temple took 40 years for our pioneer ancestors to build, and it is the icon of the church, and it is the place where everyone gathers every 6 months, and it is a very sacred space for all of us. And so I just think it's interesting that the Lord in the first presidency are the ones who established this committee. And like you said, I served in the missionary department. I've served in area presidencies around the world, and I haven't seen four apostles assigned to a specific event like this one. And as Rich said, they're deeply involved. They know what's going on from the very creative beginning of what we're doing to now pounding nails, which is where we are now. Sherry Dew, which is where we are now. Richard Sutton. And what I would add to that is just how incredible this is. It's more than just uh, it's more than just a building being renovated. I mean, 40 years to originally build it is something monumental, but with all of the modern technology we have, 7 years to renovate a building is an incredible amount of time in the modern age. And so a lot has to be done. You look at the seismic retrofit and all that has been done, it's incredible, but it's more than just the restoration of a historic building. This is an opportunity to really celebrate and rejoice together. We're really quite literally, we're inviting the entire world to come to this celebration. You guys just think about these words that are being said as we think about the proximity of the second coming, as we think about President Nelson's emphasis on the second coming, and this like revelation that he's receiving in regards to this and the fulfillment of prophecy. Okay, continuing. We want everyone to come. We recognize not everyone will be able to come to Salt Lake City during that 6 months, but we'd like to bring Salt Lake City to the entire world as well. And so we have an on-site portion where the entire world can come. And those who can't come, we're going to take Salt Lake City, or at least Temple Square, to you. And we're going to have a virtual tour of the Salt Lake Temple, unlike anything you've seen before. So that's exciting. Maybe it'll be like one of those, like a 360 tour where you're watching it and then you can like click on the screen and look up and all around. I'll bet they're going to do something like that where it's like 360. We have the new app that was introduced with the opening of the visitor center, but will only be enhanced and increased and used as part of the open house. And then will be the ongoing Temple Square app here on Temple Square. Okay, later on, Elder Nilsson, in answer to your question, I think, and I had this impression as we started to take tours through the visitor center, because we have this beautiful spot in the visitor center where we have the Christus statue, and right behind the Christus is the temple. And this is the Lord's house. This is his house. This is where he has a place to come. And hopefully that has something to do with him like coming for the second coming. Maybe his visit to the New Jerusalem, maybe just other visits that are not one of the four main visits in preparation for the second coming. But this is where he has a place to come, and we are establishing a wonderful place for him to be. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where the decisions of the church are made. The First Presidency and the 12 meet there every week, and it's a very different temple than most other temples in the church. Later on, I just want to point out, Sherry Dew points out that she's from Kansas, which I appreciate. Before moving here, I lived in Kansas for 5 years. I will say that now that I've moved to Missouri, I do view Kansas a little bit differently. I do view Kansas a little bit differently now. Kansas City Chiefs, you don't need to go to Kansas. You can just stay here. Okay, later on, Richard Sutton, we're trying to do as good a job as humanly possible to prepare ourselves for probably the largest event the church has ever put on. You guys, you're going to want to go to this. If you can, please try and physically go to this open house. But even more importantly, I would be prepared for the rededication. Again, we don't have much detail about that. Like, we don't know what day it's going to be on. We don't know if it's going to be like broadcast worldwide. But the way that they're talking here about the open house celebration, I would not be surprised at this point if it is a worldwide event. But just like with the Palmyra, New York temple and the reconstructed Nauvoo temple, it would probably be the same way, where you'll need to have a temple recommend, and then you would view it from your stake center. They would broadcast it to the stake centers. I also wonder if that's how Adam on Amen is going to take place. But the church is making a very big deal of this, and there's probably very good reason to do so. Just in this podcast, we've talked about prophecy and how this is how the Lord views this temple in this event, that it's so important that we need to assign 4 apostles to work on it, the open house celebration. And I mean, I don't know. Just be ready. So look, I I put this quote right here where President Nelson said that this was prophecy being fulfilled with the church office building Plaza and the renovation of the Solid Temple. I put it on quotes A through Z, row 118 for church office building Plaza. I do want to point out a few other things while we're here. This is Brent Roberts. It's a different Brent, Managing Director, Special Projects Department. This is from May 21st of 2024. He said, I remember when we put the monument of Isaiah 2:2, if you look at the State Street side, as you enter the plaza on the State Street side, as we put that monument up, he, President Nelson, was absolutely thrilled. And we were all thrilled because it says, and it came to pass, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the tops of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. Well, the president took a portion of that scripture, all nations shall flow unto it, and gave to us part of our mandate. He said, quote, if all nations are going to be here, then technologically we need to take care of all nations. And so the audiovisual portion that will be in the temple itself for the patrons will be in so many languages, and people for the first time throughout the world can come to the Salt Lake Temple, attend the Salt Lake Temple, and be able to hear it in their own language. And he says, and we all think that that's partial fulfillment of what Isaiah talked about, the mountain of the Lord and in this special temple. Well, in this quote from today, he definitively said that this was fulfillment of this prophecy. Later on, I was just at a meeting a few weeks ago with President Nelson, and he looked out his window and looked into that, and he said, quote, it is exactly like we as a first presidency envisioned it would be. It is beautiful. And he said, what you have done with the flowers around, and they happen to be pink flowers at that time, just enhances the square. And it's not a stagnant area with the flags moving and the wind bustling through the trees. It is exactly what we envisioned. And it shows the world that all children of God are welcome. This is similar to, we're going to hop down to row 596 for Salt Lake Temple renovation. I want to read this quick quote. This is from Josh Fenn, Vice President and Project Executive, Jacobson Construction Company, August 30th, 2024, Church Newsroom, a YouTube channel. President Nelson highlighted what he saw in vision. The nations of the world coming to this area. They keep using those words. Envision, like E-N vision, and in vision. I wouldn't be surprised if President Nelson had an actual vision of this whole project. He's the prophet of God. I think that they probably have visions much more than what we realize. Maybe we'll read about those sometime in the future whenever it's appropriate to publish those things. But you can just see the way that this is being talked about, like, in just the importance of it. I want to read this really quick. This is from Bishop Dean M. Davies. No, I'm not related to him. He passed away shortly after I started my channel, but he was first counselor in the presiding bishopric. This is a Deseret News article from 2021. During the question and answer session after the news conference, one man tried to lift the media's eyes to a broader vision. You're missing the big picture, he said. The church has a grander plan for Temple Square. In fact, church leaders' definition of what that term meant was growing too, something that remains overlooked by nearly all media and church members. Quote, there haven't been really too many questions about the renovation of the plaza to the east, said Bishop Dean M. Davies, who then was first counselor in the presiding bishopric. That's a pretty significant effort also. And I would add on that I would add on that is that, and I would add on that is that we want to make the plaza area to the east of the temple even more public and friendly. There will be new seating areas and new corridors. It's something you ought to contemplate also. It's not just the temple, but it includes all the way to State Street. That will be an integral part of this as we tie together Temple Square into one great whole. He already had redefined what Temple Square is, adding an entire city block, but he wasn't done. Quote, especially, we want to continue to emphasize that this is the Savior's house and this is his church, he continued. And so we will make every effort to introduce some new thematic elements that will help visitors to Salt Lake. That must include all the statues that they've placed on Temple Square. We want them, he finished, to think of Salt Lake just as easily as they think of Jerusalem or the Vatican as a place where Christianity really has its heart. So that is exciting. It makes me think about the millennium and the future of this church. It makes me think of President Nelson's, we're just at the exponential phase of growth. I was going to read some other things, but let me just see if there was anything else I absolutely need to read. Yeah, we'll end with this. So let's see. Is there anything? Oh, no, we got to talk about the prophecies at the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple. So this is Brent Roberts, Managing Director, Special Projects Department, Church News, May 21st, 2024. I think our mission has stayed the same, and our mission, as given to us by President Russell Nelson, was to emphasize and highlight the life and ministry and the mission of Jesus Christ all throughout Temple Square, including the temple. And the renovation of the temple, of course, was to make it a greater patron experience, as well as provide mechanical, electrical, plumbing upgrades, and most importantly, a seismic upgrade. So that it would stand through the millennium is what the president has talked about many times. I like how President Nelson many times talked about the fact that this was fulfillment of prophecy, and also that he has related, or he's talked about this project in the context of the millennium. I feel like it's pretty clear that this is a really important event that's coming up. It does seem to have something to do with the second coming in the millennium. But let's finish with this. We'll go to row 594 for Salt Lake Temple dedication prophecies. And there are two things to point out. We'll start with Elder Orson F. Whitney. This is the first prophecy. This was said in the October 1917 General Conference. He said, I wish now to refer to one of these men and to certain predictions that he made. I heard President Wilford Woodruff in April 1893, when the Salt Lake Temple was dedicated, declare that from that time forth, the Latter-day Saints would have more influence in the world, and their representatives would be treated with greater respect and consideration by their fellow men than ever before. That's interesting as we think about what we just read, that the world is going to be coming to Salt Lake, to the open house celebration. We're going to have it with the celebration. We're also going to have it again with the Olympics in 2034. Okay, but then we have this other prophecy. I'm going to read it from... I'm just going to read it from here. This is, at the time, Elder Joseph Fielding Smith of the Quorum of the 12, April 1946 General Conference. I heard President Wilford Woodruff in this same place where I stand, bear witness, as he had done in other places, in 1893, and up to the time of his death, that the angels who had been waiting to go forth to reap down the earth had now been sent upon that mission, and they were in the earth. Therefore, he said, we may look for calamities, for destruction, for plague, and bloodshed. So at the dedication, the original dedication of the Solid Temple, these angels were released. And there has not been another like a renovation of the entire temple like this, where the entire temple has been rededicated. So only the first dedication, and now this is only the second time that there's going to be another dedication. Are these bookends? I don't know. If that's what happened at the first dedication, is something going to correspond, some corresponding event going to happen with the rededication? Is this the time frame that we've had as a church to go to the world and preach the gospel and gather scattered Israel before the second coming? I wouldn't be surprised. Let's just read this other one just so that it's clear. This is in the Doctrine and Covenants student manual. It says, President Joseph Fielding Smith, who was present when President Woodruff talked about these angels at the dedication of the Solid Temple, recorded the following. Quote, one day while I was sitting in the presence of my father, President Joseph F. Smith, back about 1908 or 9, somewhere in there, I called attention to these statements of President Woodruff, and I said I would like to go over the records from the time of the dedication of the temple up until now, and see what we can find in regard to calamities, destructions, plagues, and he encouraged me to do it, and so I did. So I went over the newspapers and over the magazines and jotted down year by year the destructions, so something similar to what I'm doing with my spreadsheets, the commotions among men, everything in the nature of a calamity, and to my great astonishment, each year they increased. And they have been increasing ever since I quit making that record. I was greatly astonished by it. And when I called the attention of one of my neighbors to it, he almost got angry at me and said, oh, well, we've got better facilities now for discovering these things. I don't believe it. And he is a member of the church too, but seemed to lack faith in these predictions. So that's what happened with the original dedication of the Solid Temple. Now we have all this attention being placed on the rededication of the temple. It's going to be, according to what we just read, the largest event in church history. We just had a prophet who was really, really focused on the second coming. We just had a crazy year like 2020 and everything that happened in that year and everything since. These are exciting times, to say the least, and I would be prepared for these things that are coming up. All right, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.